Rami, Mayor from Sydney, Australia. I just want to relay to you an experience we had last year. Last year, I chaired the Coalition for Justice and Peace in Palestine, and one of the decisions we made was to meet with the Australian Foreign Minister. And the reason we wanted to meet him is to affect or relay to him the fact that we are quite dissatisfied with the voting pattern of Australia within the UN, because more and more the Australian government has been voting against any pro-Palestine resolutions. The experience we went through was quite horrific, to be quite honest, because we first had to communicate with the unions who were Labour Party supporters, and through the union members we had to contact the members of Parliament within the New South Wales Parliament. There's a small group called the Palestine Support Group within the Parliament there, and from there we have to pull some strings for them to contact the office of the Foreign Minister in Canberra as well as in Sydney for us to be able to arrange. And that was all done on a part-time job, volunteer basis during our working hours. To be able to coordinate all these three levels of politicians, as it were. And finally, once we got to the top of the mountain, we finally got to have a meeting with the Foreign Minister. He gave us 3 hours. I mean, he called us 3 hours prior and he said, we can meet, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so we really had to leave our jobs and just rush to the meeting office in the Sydney downtown area. That whole experience took us probably 2 weeks. So the amount of work was really, really huge. But once we were there, it was very, very important for us to communicate very well in soundbites and affects the outcome of the meeting by telling him exactly how we feel and maybe reasons why the Australian government should change from the voting pattern at the UN. It wasn't easy because he was a damn good communicator. And he tried to dominate the discussion all the time, and we tried to fight back. So 2 key points, Chris. The first key point is that you really need a huge network, and you really need to know a lot of people to be able to professionally lobby, politically lobby within any particular government. I'm sure it's much more complex within the States because the government in Washington probably has 300,000 administrators in there. It's much easier in a way in Australia because they are a bit more accessible, but still we had to go through a lot of effort to do so. But once we're there, then the actual job starts. So we had to do our research. We had to know exactly what pattern we're talking about, what exactly and where exactly the Australian government has voted, and then tell him exactly what we needed to tell him. So we need to research well, communicate well as have a huge network of people that we know who can help us advance to the higher government echelons, if you like, and meet the people that we need to meet. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rami. Thank you. Yeah. We've talked about a lot about communicating well and forming partnership and working within the government, like joining a commission. I'd like to hear something about how to effectively affect or influence the media. How do you deliver that message to your local community through the media?
I think our next speaker is perhaps going to address that. Thank you.
I am Farid Cajat from Peru. I've been involved with the Spanish-speaking branch of CNN for quite a few years now, and I've had the opportunity to talk to some board members, and my take on what's the problem with their coverage is that they basically don't do any research about the facts. They just report versions of parties on the same events, and of course every party gives a different version. But if the only thing you do is give a version, take the version of the parties involved, chances are one of the parties is lying. And if you don't do any research on your own as a media outlet, you are giving basically the same coverage to the one that lies and to the one that says the truth. So it's important to establish the facts on the ground. And B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights organization, did something, an experience that we could replicate. They basically gave cameras to regular people in Palestinian areas in which human rights abuses were committed. So they could register those abuses and provide reliable information on what was going on that could even be used in court. So having a way to establish the facts on the ground is important because Israel always disputes those facts. So if you can record issues like those, that would be important. The B'Tselem experience might be something to think about or to replicate. The other thing is thinking of my own country, Peru. I mean, there's no human way in which you can get a Peruvian, citizens of a country with plenty of problems of its own, to be interested in what happens on the other extreme of the world, meaning here. But there are some topics that could be of mutual interest. For instance, in the case of Peru, and I'm pretty sure that this happens elsewhere, just a scandal erupted in the last few days involving arms sales from Israel to Peru that were overpriced. So corruption charges on the sales of weapons from Israeli companies to the Peruvian state. And we have also, regarding security issues, the fact that we have, it's a new trend in Peru, Israeli military advisors or former military officers of the Israeli army who are now security advisors to the Peruvian state. And in one case it was established that this was a guy, a general, former Israeli general, who has been accused of human rights violations. So to gather this kind of information, to have some database or some links to independent sources that could help gather information about those issues and use those issues when these kinds of events arise, use that information would be important to deal with, at once with the local issue, but also with the link to Israel, which is usually involved in cases of corruption and human rights abuses when it provides assistance in security affairs.
Okay, I haven't slept. I was up looking at the bylaws, so you have to excuse me. I'm a little tired. I have a few points on media and a few points on lobbying. But I'll preface it by saying what others have said. You have to be involved first to have credibility. In my community, people know who I am because I'm involved with, I'm on the board of the YWCA, the governor appointed me to the board of trustees on the university. I'm involved in a lot of charitable organizations. I'm in a book club, and I didn't do that overnight. It was work and work. In fact, to the point where I said to the Democratic Party, which I'm on the leadership council of for the state of Ohio, when they came back to me for funds, I did a fundraiser for the governor, and then they came back to me. I said, you know what? I'm kind of getting tired of this. When are you going to acknowledge us? What do you want? I said, don't appoint me, appoint somebody from our community, but start appointing us, because if we don't get appointed, I'm going to lose these people that are helping all the time. So that's not talking about the Palestinian issue, but it is, because it gives me that entry